Today's presentation will be by myself, Richard Anderson, on spirituality, followed by Joyce Salvage on deep sharing. We are members of the first Thursday monthly UU Covenant Circle. I have been leading the group meetings for 5 years and have been a member of UCN, now Seaview, since 2013. The Earl E. Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing offers the following definition. Spirituality includes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves and a search for meaning in life. As such, it is a universal human experience. People may describe a spiritual experience as sacred or transcendent, or simply a deep sense of aliveness and interconnectedness. Participating in a covenant circle involves practicing the 7 principles. In my view, these 3 especially relate to spirituality. The first, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The third, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregation. And the 7th, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. I feel involvement in our covenant circle has enriched my life and spirituality. Today, I will relate 2 personal stories that involve my awareness of spirituality. For 29 years, my first wife, Vivian, had a chronic illness. Neither of us was a churchgoer. I kept my head down and did all I could to help her with the host of little and great problems she endured through her illness. When, a few weeks before her death, she chose to have regular conversations with a hospital chaplain, it came as a wake-up call for me. I needed to pay more attention to the religious side of my life. Vivian and I were both bird watchers. After she died, I continued that activity. One day, I stood still on the sidewalk while looking at a handsome male cardinal just 20 feet away. As he hopped towards me, I had a strong feeling that Vivian's spirit was in the bird and was communicating in a reassuring way. It was a spiritual moment for me when time stood still. My second spiritual experience came after my sister Joy Chalmers died in Vancouver, BC on June the 7th, 2021. Joy was adopted and half Cree Indian. I remember her arriving in our home near Christmas 1953 at age 6 months. At age 45, with the help of a birth sibling, Joy discovered her Indigenous family and heritage. Soon she started working at the Pacific Association for First Nations Women, where, among other things, she was the manager of home care services, supervising 40 employees, and on the weekends ran the Mentor Me and mentoring Indigenous youth programs. Joy and I were always close. She loved her friends, her co-workers, our family, her birth family, and her own family. She had 3 children and was a doting grandma to a child with Down syndrome. She became a tribal elder, a matriarchal figure to hundreds of young First Nations girls who over the years attended her weekend Urban Butterflies programs, designed to help them learn Native arts and culture. 2 days after Joy passed, I had a very unusual experience. It was like an omen. Hiking with a friend, we found a monarch butterfly lying motionless, wings folded on the ground. A man nearby told us he had seen the butterfly drop to the ground not 5 minutes earlier. Never in my life had I seen such a thing, and as I held the insect in my hand, I couldn't help feeling joy that was you, as your spirit ascended to the sky, going to meet the Great Spirit. In conclusion, one of the things we do in the UU Covenant Circle is active listening. One person speaks at a time, as long as they need, and everyone else listens, trying to open their minds to receive what the speaker is saying without making judgments or comparisons to their own experience. I believe it is that process that has led to my sense of increased spiritual listening and growth.
Deep sharing. My first experience with being a Unitarian was in the fall of 1969 when my husband and I moved back east from California after my father had died. We wanted to be a support to my mother. After attending the church for a couple of months, we were asked to be youth group leaders, which we really enjoyed. In November, we traveled by bus with our group and other church members to a major anti-war demonstration on Veterans Day in Washington, D.C. By the following spring, we realized that we could not easily find permanent professional work in the Boston area, so we returned to Berkeley. It was a few years later that we settled down in Maine and found a UU church to join with our children. We have now been members of Seaview for almost 3 years, and we have both regularly attended the adult discussion group. But I only recently joined my current covenant group. I have grown in this group through a different way of sharing. In our covenant groups, we share our inner thoughts and our prior life experiences that we have been thinking about in relation to the themes that we are exploring as a community. Our process in covenant together is different from a conversation in a discussion group. When we share, others listen intently without giving feedback or asking questions. After sharing, there is a silence for several minutes to create a quiet space to be able to just process what has been said. When another person in the group is ready to share, the whole group listens intently to what is said. When I first joined my covenant group, I did not fully understand the purpose of this process. I had never shared to a group with no interaction or response back and forth. At first, I thought it seemed unnatural and an artificial rule structure. It wasn't until my first sharing that I felt the positive effect. It was somehow spiritual. I could hear only my voice and could think more clearly how to express my story on the theme of what is play. I could finish my thoughts as a whole without being asked questions or hearing other stories similar to mine. It was just me being me, describing my memories of the play in my life at different times and places and how I am playful. It was completely silent and it felt a bit like meditating. The only time I can remember being heard like this was as a Catholic in the sacrament of confession. The priest would listen in silence until I had finished what I was saying. The confessional and the church was perfectly quiet. No one spoke in our covenant group, even after I said I was done sharing. A space of quiet contemplation was made in between my sharing and that of the next person. It felt spiritual. I don't remember being in deep reflection with a community quite like this before. A safe space for my soul. And it leaves me wanting to remember this feeling when I am listening intently to another person who is sharing what is deep and important to them.